All right. So we had a fascinating lesson last week. Welcome to lesson two, ladies and gentlemen, of For All Humankind, JLI's beautiful course here about Judaism's message for all of humanity. And we're going to be continuing our discussion from last week. Last week, we had a general discussion about what it means to be a Jew in a world, and the mission statement of a Jew to be a light unto the nations, to teach all of humanity core principles of morality and ethics. We spoke about the first two of the seven Noahide laws last week, which was number one, you have to believe in one God, believing in God, and number two, do not curse God. Why is it so foundational for a society to be built upon? You have to have these two ideas. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a more of a detailed dive of how that applies to um, laws as in do not murder, laws of do not steal. These things typically we don't need a God to tell us these ideas that this is a moral thing not to do. So we're going to be discussing today options, seemingly other options to replace God as our moral foundation. Is it maybe logic could replace God? Maybe society can replace God. Maybe our conscience can replace God. And we're going to look into that. I think it's a pretty fascinating class. So I'm happy you're all here. Without further ado, let's jump right in. I believe we're on page number 54 in the book.
Or 46.
46. Oops. Yes, I stand corrected. 46 indeed. So we're going to start off. I'll share my screen. One sec. I'll make sure to share with the sound thing, obviously. Okay. Okay, so how Judaism's universal values can help us build better lives and societies. We're going to start with section one, which is making morality moral. It's pretty good. So the question is morality obvious? Let's start today with Dale. Are you there? You have a book, Dale?
Just give me the page.
The page is on 46, right? 47? 47.
Okay. Morality obvious? Can logic create morality? Explore the value of innate human dignity, where it comes from, and the trouble with pinning new sources to a timeless moral principle. Making morality moral. Most people assume that morality stands on its own, that ideas like human dignity, compassion, and justice are self-evident, upheld by reason, empathy, or shared social norms. Let us question that assumption and ask, what actually gives moral rules their authority? What makes them binding rather than optional?
There you go. Perfect. So last week we spoke about the seven Noahide laws. We said the Jews are entrusted with the task of teaching them, and that the first two laws are the basic. They set the stage for a tranquil society. Today, as I said, we're going to be discussing the prohibitions against stealing, murder, and eating a limb torn from a living animal. It's a very specific, gruesome prohibition. But back in the day, before refrigeration, instead of processing a whole animal, they would put a tourniquet of sorts on a limb. They would remove the limb, keep the animal alive, and they would eat it. One of the most cruel things you could imagine. But the Torah's prohibition against cruelty to animals is a specific prohibition against this specific cruelty, which is the umbrella for all cruelty for animals. So we're going to be discussing those three. Okay, let's see text number one. Mike, bivakasha, on page 47 from the Rambam. You're muted, Mike.
Thank you. Neither pious nor wise. Maimonides, the Rambam, Mishnah Torah. A pious Gentile is defined as one who commits to following the seven mitzvot and is meticulous in their observance. And they do so because they recognize that they are God's commandments to the descendants of Noah, as subsequently written in the Torah and relayed by Moses. A pious Gentile has a share in the world to come. If, however, a Gentile observes these laws simply because they're sensible and dictated by logic, they do not have the status of a resident foreigner and are not reckoned among the pious Gentiles, but rather from their wise ones.
So the Rambam says they're not righteous, they're not pious, but they're considered wise if they follow these seven Noahide laws, not because God said them, but because their own logic dictates such. We're going to see later the Rambam has a little bit of a different version. So the Rambam says here, he says, are not reckoned among the pious Gentiles, but rather among their wise ones. The Rambam has a different quote that says, and neither among the wise ones, which means that if there were a Gentile to follow the laws, but simply because they are sensible and logic, they're not either wise. Okay? It's a little bit of a radical statement from the Rambam, but that's not the final version in his book. The final version of his book is to keep the commandments, these commandments, because they're a command from God, is pious, wise, and they have a share to the world to come. If it's sensible, it's not a good. It's not a good. The Rambam doesn't have doesn't have good things to say. At best, he says it's just because they're considered wise, but not pious. Definitely not pious. So let's keep on going. Ken, please.
Two, flawed alternatives. If most people agree on basic moral rules, why insist on something more? Why is it not enough to say that ethics come from clear thinking, a healthy conscience, or shared social values? A concrete moral dilemma will force us to confront how we actually make ethical decisions when comfort, logic, emotion, and social pressure collide. This will allow us to test some foundations we often assume are solid.
So the question is, why does logic need something else? Why can't logic itself, according to the Rambam, logic itself, he says, is not even wise? That means if you were to follow logic to come to moral social codes, moral conclusions, it's not even wise, according to the Rambam.
Because logic, if it's framed in community's perception of it, it can be spun into anything. Anything can be spun. And all you have to do is look at some cults or Iran. No, I don't know. You just look at communities that have a different logic.
Right.
And
Okay.
the logic is not finite.
Right. It's not, logic has its limits. 100%. We're going to explore exactly that. Okay, let's see the question. Why is it vital for ethics to be rooted in belief in God and obedience of his laws? So we're going to go into a scenario, which is a pretty classic scenario that I'm sure you guys have seen before. I'm sure friendships were broken up because of this question. The question is, who would you save? And exercise 2.1 on page 49 goes as follows. You are standing on a beach. To your left, a person who you do not know is drowning. To your right, your family dog, the one you grew up with and deeply love, is also drowning. You can only save one. Whom do you save?
Mm.
For this exercise, ignore how others might judge your choice. Assume no one will ever know what you decided. In other words, we don't want you to have outside pressure to make a decision. Would you say, I'd save the dog, A, B, the stranger, C, it's a matter of personal choice, or D, it depends on, I don't know. Now, to say that the dog knows how to swim or this or that, they both don't know how to swim, remove all that from the equation. You have in your hands to save one.
You save the person.
Yeah,
Shmuel says the person.
agreed.
I
Who else
agree,
agrees?
but I'd have to kill myself after that if my dog. No, no, it's a very big dilemma.
It
Yeah.
is a dilemma. I know.
You're obligated to save both, but you can only save one, and a human being takes precedence.
Okay, maybe you read this class already, Shmuel. No, I'm joking. But yeah, it does. It does take
Well,
precedent.
it's funny, and yet you can use the Torah. It tells you feed your animals before you feed yourself.
Oh, the
And
Torah says
I'm
in the
kind
morning,
of,
feed your animals before you feed yourself. Good point, Dale. No.
well, and I'm thinking, ooh, does that apply here? I
So in
mean,
2003, the Chicago Tribune posted this question online and asked people to answer honestly. And people had something like, okay, people said saving the person, it's a person versus an animal. Okay. There were some people that said, depending on the age of the person or the age of the animal, if the person is older and sick and whatever, and they anyway, maybe have a terminal illness. Some people said that the person's interaction might last a few seconds and they go on their way, but yet the dog, if it's young, could last a decade of love and loyalty and connection and enhanced life, right? So these are the answers that were given. Barry or Bernice, you want to give an opinion there, or you guys are muted though?
I guess my honest answer to that, I'd like to think I'd say the human, but to be honest with you, that would be a very emotional moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you wouldn't have a lot of time to think. So to tell you the truth, knowing how close I felt to some of the dogs we've owned, I might have gone for the dog. It would depend on
Wow.
the
I hear
circumstance.
you. I hear you.
That's a very honest answer.
Hmm.
Okay. That's an honest answer, especially if we're saying that no one will ever know, right? It's not like it'll be written on the front page of the paper the next day. It's like, what do you do, right? And there's no question this is it's a difficult choice, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to explore this case of the human and the dog against three alternatives of what might give ethics its authority. We're going to look at logic, we're going to look at conscious, and we're going to look at society. And each one of these, whether it's logic or conscious or society, we'll define each one, we'll explore each one, we'll see, try to match this scenario and other moral dilemmas against each one of these alternative to God sources of morality. Okay? So before we go further,
Rabbi, quick
yeah, go
question.
ahead, Mike.
Are we using the words ethics and morality essentially similarly? Are they synonyms for this purpose?
I would say yes, but give me a scenario where you think they might be different.
Different people have different sets of definitions. If you read some philosophy, they just it's a matter of definition, and I just need to know how we're using it in this particular case.
Right.
Ethics is a personal set of values. It's the one that I hold independent of everything else. Morality is what society's definition of important values are, which I may or may not share. I mean, it's not, I'm not
We're
saying
more
that that's
talking
right.
about societal, not
Okay.
personal. I
Yeah.
mean,
So, I mean,
the hope is that those two align, right? Like what,
yes.
right? That's the hope.
Yeah.
But let's not talk about personal because then we're going off. I'll try to stick to the word morality. Also, I think like ethics are like a list of ethics. I don't know. Maybe it's more defined than morality in general, but I'll try to stick to more morality. But I'm definitely using them in one interchangeably in my brain, at least.
Yeah. That's
Thank you for
fine.
the question. Thank you for the question. So the first one we're going to do is logic. Logic is very powerful, obviously, but it can prove anything, but you need to tell it what to prove. It's like a lawyer or your accountant. Say, hey, I want to pay this amount in tax. Figure out how I pay it, right? Those business owners, right? So it's like you want your conclusion, and logic It's very powerful, but it can be used in that sense as well. What we're going to do now is we're going to play a little bit of, it's a humorous video, but it's a cute video, kind of dealing with the dilemma we're dealing with here. So let's see. You guys hear the audio?
Good.
Mommy, I want a cookie. Can I take one?
No, we'll all have some after dinner
Why can't I just take cookies right now?
because those cookies aren't yours and we all live together, so we have to be fair.
Why not be fair? Why can't it just be mine? I'm hungry.
Because people would get upset. Wouldn't you be upset if Ben or Sarah ate all the cookies?
Yes, I'll literally cry.
We don't get people upset for no reason, do we?
What if there is a good reason? Like eating a cookie is a good reason.
It's just wrong.
Why is it wrong?
Because it just is.
That's not an answer. Why?
Okay, let's try this again. People matter, so their feelings matter.
Why do people matter?
People matter because they're human beings.
Says who? If I don't agree that people matter, can I take the cookies?
No.
Why not?
Because I said so? Okay, fine. You want a real answer? It's because then nothing works anymore. If people don't matter, then fairness doesn't matter. Rules don't matter. Then the whole idea of mine and yours falls apart.
So it's not a real rule. It's just to make things work.
Asking why about everything can be fun, but at a certain point, we need to accept some rules, even if we can't prove them.
Like what?
Like that people matter, that hurting someone needs a good reason, and that you can't just decide that fairness doesn't count.
So it's like the rules before the rules.
Exactly.
But wait, who makes those rules?
Cute.
Yes.
Well done. So we're trying to figure out if you back everything up, there has to be a set of rules that we all agree upon, and then we're going to apply it back to any scenario. So before there are rules, there has to be a set of rules that we agree upon. This is what we're trying to figure out here tonight. Those rules that based on those basic rules, everything else is a child of, is what we're trying to figure out. And we're trying to see, is logic enough for that? Is society enough for that? Is conscious enough for that? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to explore our scenario with logic. Our scenario with logic between who are we trying to save here? The person or the animal, the dog? So if you're going to go according to logic, perhaps a dog and a human being are both human beings. They're both beings. They're both creations. Maybe they're differing in degree. This is maybe a different degree, but they're not different in kind. It's both a created being. So you have a cat, you have a mouse, you have a dog. I mean, what's the difference, right? You have a human being. So fine, yes, a human being might be more important, but in essence, they're both the same. They're complex biological organisms, both of them. Let's look at the Declaration of Independence, the self-evident truths in the Declaration of Independence. Let me see here. Barry.
Oh, wow. Self-evident truths. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Questioning the self-evident. We hold, they say, these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. In what are they created equal? Is it in size, strength, understanding, figure, civil or moral accomplishments, or situational life.
So text 2A is obviously from the Declaration of Independence, but these are premises that are asserted. They're not proven. The premise of that all men are created equal, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are asserted ideas, are asserted premises. They're not logically derived. And 2B is from the Gentleman's Magazine in September of 1776, which is obviously a British publication trying to challenge this self-evident equality idea. In what sense are these things equal? Ethics based on unproven premise. You're saying there's ethics based on a premise that's not proven. Use your brain to prove a certain premise, seemingly. So to use reasoning, we have to have a moral premise that we need to stand on. And then reasoning could be worked off that. So we're going to look at a couple of examples, but there's no premise that compels one to save a human being over a dog. Let's see what that means. Moral premise, and you add to it logic, you have a conclusion, a healthy conclusion. But if the moral premise is not moral, it's a rotten moral premise, and you add logic to it, then you have a catastrophic conclusion. So the logic itself, without the guardrails of a moral premise, is basically useless. And we're going to give some examples of what that is. If you look at figure 2.1, cases of premises leading to disaster. Okay, so historical case is Nazi Germany. The rotten moral premise is human worth is determined by race and biological fitness. The resulting moral conclusion was eugenics, forced sterilization, and genocide. One example. Next example is the chattel slavery. The rotten moral premise was some humans have no rights, some are property rather than moral equals, and the resulting moral conclusion was systemic cruelty and lifelong bondage. The French Revolution, reign of terror, political purity overrides moral limits. The resulting moral conclusion from that was mass execution and a state of terror. The historical case of Stalin's Soviet Union. The rotten moral premise was individuals are expendable for the collective and the future utopia. What was the result of that? And Jews were very much a part of the suffering, was purges, gulags, famine, and mass death. Imperial Japan, 1930s and 40s. National imperial supremacy defined moral worth. The resulting moral conclusion from that was atrocities against civilians and prisoners of war. Honor cultures, the rotten moral premise is that family or tribal honor outweighs individual life. And the resulting moral conclusion is honor killings and sanctioned intra-family violence. So we obviously see that the first principle cannot be a rotten moral premise, because then logic is not a proper counterweight to a rotten moral premise. So we're just making the case that logic itself is perhaps not enough to guide a society in a moral path. The next one we're going to explore is conscious. But let's pause for a second and maybe analyze logic. Let's just take 1 or 2 minutes. Anyone has any comments to share? Okay, all
Well,
good?
Rabbi, when I think of logic, I think of the human mind, rightly or wrongly, and not necessarily what is a God's commandment or will. When I think the moral premise, particularly the examples here, one word comes to mind with each of those that I would call rotten, and that's a human emotion called hate. And I think that emotion sometimes overrides our logic, and that's where we can run into trouble.
Right. So you would agree that So you would agree that without a proper guardrail, hate will run wild and people will use their logic to justify that hate and then do whatever, right?
Yes.
Okay, Mike?
The calling this general topic logic is a kind of a straw man for what I would consider to be a little bit more powerful source of morality, and that is rationality.
Mm,
I don't see rationality and logic as the same thing. I think that there are philosophers who say we can look at what's good for society by applying our minds, as Barry was suggesting, to problems in society. Now, I'm trying to articulate their position. It's not necessarily mine, but they would say we have to look at what if your goal is something good for humanity, then we can use our rationality to work on that and come to conclusions about what's good for society in more detail. It's so rationality is more than just a process of starting with some arbitrary premise and generating a conclusion. It's looking at the premise itself and saying, is that a good premise according to other things? And then the philosophers ask, well, what does it mean to be good? I mean, and all
oh,
of this is
are you trying to suggest that the premise is born from rationale?
I am suggesting that for many philosophers, the premise is in fact born from rationality. Uh,
So so
yeah,
then so so that's not an asserted premise. That's a derived premise.
it
It's not an absolute asserted premise.
it is not an asserted premise
Okay.
because those philosophers would say you can't have asserted premises.
Okay. Fine. I don't mind if you use the word rationale. I don't think that that's I think you can I still think we run into the same issue. That's all I'm saying. If it's not asserted, then we're running into the same issue. You're just saying that, you're saying that there's rational that gives birth to premise, and then we have rational again or logic again that will then do whatever. That's
Yeah,
okay. But you're not dealing with a bulletproof premise. You're dealing with a malleable premise.
absolutely right.
Right.
I mean, but now I'm talking about how I feel about it and how you feel about it. But
Right.
you can get into a lot of arguments in this area in a philosophy class.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I understand that. Yeah.
Rationality,
Okay. Say again.
rationality is kind of murky and hard to pin down. It's not as clear cut as logic. And uh, you have philosophers who disagree with each other very markedly as to what is rational and what isn't.
Correct. Absolutely.
Got it. So you would not interchange those two words. I hear you. Okay. Let's keep on going. There's a lot of actual material to cover tonight. I don't mind discussing anything afterwards, but I'd like to finish on time. So let's see. Okay, the next thing we're going to discuss is conscious. We're going to use the same idea. Could conscious be a substitute or a base for let's say against murder, for example? So in 2021, there were about 458,000 intentional homicides around the globe. That means there are hundreds of thousands of people that took the decision to take somebody else's life. So, can conscience be a moral foundation? So, to evaluate this, let's see, let's evaluate the human being a little bit. So, human beings are, we have our conscious, and our conscious is born from maybe built up out of time, the society we live in. we have the equipment in us for moral judgment. In other words, we could have a moral judgment, but what that judgment is a good question, right? So one person's terrorist could be the other person's freedom fighter, right? So
Right.
we have an innate capacity to have a conscious, but the content of what that conscious is a learned content. So yes, we have our moral innate. We have a morality. Sorry, let me use. Let me not mix words. We have innate. We have a conscious that we all bend towards. We all bend towards a conscious that we automatically have. The question is obviously, here is the tension. The
Well,
content
like, for
is
example, if you grow up being taught all through your life since you're a kid that it's such a pleasure and joy and a mission to kill a Jew, and when you're
right.
faced with it, do you do it, or is there something higher than that?
This is the
Uh,
highest calling. This is exactly the
right.
issue what Israel's dealing with. You're dealing
Yeah.
with an enemy that this is in their conscious, baked in. It's learned.
Yeah.
It's learned. It's adopted. So getting back to our case scenario here, there's
Yeah.
no objective right and wrong. There's only preference
Right.
in the scenario with the dog and the human
Yeah.
being. So could conscious guide us here? Not really. Yes, we have the innate ability to be conscionable and to be conscious, but we don't have the ability to know what is right and what is wrong and what is the moral thing to do. Okay, how about the next one, which is society, which is what societal norms agreed upon. As we know, probably this is not the best one to work off. Um, What if society as a whole feels that killing's okay for entertainment, like the Roman Empire, the gladiators? What if, like in ancient Greek, leaving unwanted infants to die? This is what they did. This is societal. What happens when a collective decides that you have to commit a genocide, like in Nazi Germany? So society, obviously, whichever choice will avoid public outrage. That's all it is. Depends. In certain societies, a cow is considered such an important thing, like in India, whatever. Maybe if there's a cow drowning or a human being drowning, certain societies will say, go for the cow. It's holier, it's better. I don't know.
Yeah.
So society norms are always shifting constantly. So we're going to be able to go and say to base a moral hardline code on societal norms. Obviously, that's a very faulty discussion. Okay. Let's look at page 52, which is figure 2.2, is alternative foundations of morality. I'm going to skip reading through every single thing here, but here you have a chart of dealing with these three ideas: mind, heart, and collective mind and hearts, which is logic and reason, conscious and society, the core claim, the strength of the claim, the fundamental problem with the claim, and the result that may cut that made the application of it in the dog and the stranger dilemma. Okay,
Yep.
let's analyze at the end, but let's move on to section 3, which is a higher source. Let's go, Bernice, if you can read.
If morality is built on human reason, it will shift when our reasoning shifts.
1 minute, hold on one
Built on
second.
human feeling, it will collapse when our feelings change. And
1 minute, where are you reading, Bernice?
Page 53.
And if it is built on society, it will be rewritten the moment society decides it has outgrown yesterday's values. So, when logic, conscience, and culture fail as stable sources of truth, where do we turn? Judaism's answer takes us back to Mount Sinai. The Ten Commandments were delivered in a way that carries an unexpected message. There is a feature built into them that forces us to rethink what morality actually is, where it comes from, and what keeps it from quietly eroding over time.
So I don't know where you just read, but it sounded good. I'll just tell you that.
Oh,
It's page
page 3.
53.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have that here. Do you have something called a higher source? What happens when the very tools we rely on?
It says a higher source, and then it's what Bernice read.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I guess there's a little mistake here. That's fine. Okay, let's keep on going. Okay, good. So what is that higher source according to Judaism?
Torah must be.
Okay, we say what? It is God. God
Yeah,
is that higher source. Now we're gonna show you something about the Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments was delivered on two tablets. One tablet had five, the other tablet had five. Five plus five equals 10. Very good. So the first tablet on the right, here it's backwards. But the first tablet on the right is what? The relationship with Hashem and us. I am God your God. Honor the Sabbath, right? It's interesting that
right.
honor your parents is on the first half. We'll talk about that another time. But the first one is is the relationship between us and God, and the second one are the relationships between us and the other, between each other. So the question obviously is, God's going to give the status of not having immoral sexual relations to the level of I am God your God, or do not covet is to the level of I am God your God. If this is God's relation with us, then let the Ten Commandments be about us and him. Why is he given equal importance to do not covet? You're not allowed to be jealous. Yeah, but she went on that vacation. I'm jealous. She has that diamond ring. I'm jealous. He has that
Well,
sports car. I'm
because the
jealous. What?
humans were put here to interact with each other, but in the name of God and the Ten Commandments. So we need to bring heaven down here in these interpersonal relations, and that's why it's so paramount in
Okay.
tablets.
Okay. So the Rebbe has a letter. The Rebbe is going to answer this idea, which is
Okay.
why is this at the same level? Let's look at text number 3. Shmuel, I know you don't have a book with you, right?
No.
So
I
maybe next week, God willing. Let's go
yeah.
back to Dale to
Okay.
text number 3, please.
Okay. The Ten Commandments bring The Ten Commandments bring together two foundations that, at first glance, seem worlds apart. The opening commandments, I am your God, you shall have no other God, and so on, express and reveal the deepest truths of God's oneness. The others, by contrast, deal with seemingly simple rules like do not murder and do not steal, principles that appear obvious even to ordinary human understanding. But the truth is that if moral laws, even those that seem self evident, are left to human reasoning alone without their divine foundation and authority, human judgment, driven by self interest, can twist them beyond. That's what I was saying, spin, can twist them beyond recognition. An outright transgression can end up being rebranded as a mitzvah, interpreting do not murder and do not steal from the standpoint of personal benefit. Many nations and countless individuals have managed to justify their most terrific goals, not to mention excusing the means used to achieve them, as has been tragically demonstrated, especially in very recent times.
So that's the Rebbe saying these are two different tablets. Yes, two different relationships, but the foundation is one. If you're going to do the second half because of the first half, the same way you're going to do the first half, you're going to do the second half, then sorry guys. You see my screen again? If you're going to do the second half the same way you're going to do the first half, then you're going to have a society that endures. If you're going to do the first half, if you're going to do the second half because you think it's a good idea, then you're going to rot away. It's going to be a mess. Sorry about that. Okay. So, we're talking about extreme examples, gladiators and whatever. But let's like gladiators and the Nazis. Let's just zoom back. What happens if my $20 bill
Or Bill.
to this massive corporation? What's the difference? It's fine. They need my stupid money, right? So you're going to rationalize things. What happens if, is it okay to hurt someone's feelings if they deserve it? Maybe they deserve it. Something small. If our moral compass is based on logic, then we're gonna weave through all that. We're gonna mess around with everything. So, or we could justify anything. Everyone does it. In Disney, you say, "Oh, this kid, yeah, this kid's 3, so you pay less." What's the difference? What the heck's the difference to Disney if the kid is 2 or 4? No difference, right? So these little things make a big difference. What are we talking about here? Is this a social code or is this God-based morality? That's the difference. That's what the Rebbe says, that when the first half and the second half of the Ten Commandments, they're both sourced in the same place. That's going to make sure a society can endure.
Now, does any rabbinic responses and all the wrangling that goes on from the beginning and all the
Yep.
layers we've put on in responsa and all the literature that's come after the original set rules, isn't that an example of applying logic to God's? I mean, think
Yes,
about
but there's a very narrow path you have to take to apply logic. You can't just take
it.
any
Okay.
logic that pops into your head. You have to apply certain rules. There are 13
Okay.
rules in which Torah is derived. So you have to use rules. Logic is a good thing, but unchecked logic could end you up anywhere. Could end you on Mars. There's no you need to have the barrier. Okay.
Mhm.
The next 3 of the 7 Noahide laws are: do not steal, do not murder, and do not eat flesh that was torn from a living animal. We are going to look at these 3, and we're going to analyze them based on what we've just discussed. So let's see, Mike. We're gonna deal with stealing. Mike, we're section 4 there. The line that logic can't draw. You see that?
No.
Oh, yeah. On page
Where?
56, page 56.
Oh, there we go.
The line that logic can't draw. Some moral rules feel so obvious that we barely stop to examine them. Of all the principles we live by, this one seems the least controversial, the most self-evident. But once we begin to ask why it is binding, the ground beneath it starts to look less simple than we assumed. Let's take a closer look at a rule everyone agrees on and see what really holds it up.
So the question is, every civilization agrees stealing. You have to have property rights. Belongs to me, not to you. So, it's common sense. So, can logic get us to a place where stealing is not okay?
Yeah, well, you can get to a point where it's okay.
One
Robin.
second, 1 second. Does logic a bulletproof moral base, or do
No.
we need something higher? Oh, it's not. So let's see. So is this mine because the law says so? Says so? We all agree not to steal. So there was
That's not true because there was always Robin Hood. You can steal from the rich to give to the poor. I mean, there are ways of spinning that as well.
right. Exactly. There's ways of spinning everything. But if the idea is that these are my law, this is my property, and you can't take my property. So if theft is wrong because the property system agrees to make it a society that's cooperative, so then what happens if there are some loopholes? Like, for example, if there is victimless theft. What's an example of victimless theft? Let's give some examples. So what is an example of victimless theft?
No
1
idea.
second. So we're gonna look at text number 4a. where the Alter Rebbe describes in his book of the Code of Jewish Law about what might be considered victimless threat. Let's see. Ken, please.
No exceptions. It is forbidden to rob or steal anything at all according to Torah law, whether from a Jew or a non-Jew, whether from an adult or a minor. This applies even if the non-Jew caused pain to the Jew, even though an amount worth less than a
Peruta.
a tiny coin of minimal value, the smallest unit that Jewish law treats as legally significant money, is not classified as monetary property and would not obligate formal repayment. Taking even that amount is still prohibited from the outset. Even someone whose life is in danger and who needs to take another person's property in order to save themselves from death may only take it with the intent to repay. For although all prohibitions in the Torah are set aside in a case of life-threatening danger, except for idolatry, forbidden sexual relations, and murder, it is forbidden to save oneself with another person's money with the intention of being exempt from payment. Rather, it must be taken with the intent to repay when one is able, since repayment is possible. Even taking with intent to repay is only permitted in the face of life-threatening danger. But where there is no such danger, it is forbidden even with intent to repay with something better than what was taken. This includes taking for the medical treatment of an illness that is not life-threatening, or to save oneself from an oppressor who is causing physical suffering that is not life-threatening. It is even forbidden to steal on condition of paying double compensation.
So if ownership is mainly to maintain order and to prevent injury, then when you have a victimless threat, there's a ton of gray area. And the Alter Rebbe says clearly, the only time you're allowed to take something from somebody else without permission is two conditions. Number one, there's a present life-threatening situation in front of you, and stealing this item will save a life. But even so, you're not allowed to do that without the intention to repay it. This is a major thing. The Alter Rebbe says, according to the Torah, why is stealing not allowed? Because it is a divine. This is the key word here. This item is divinely placed in your domain, and nobody and nothing can take it out. Well, what if it's it's pocket change? You can't. Doesn't matter. What if they took something from me and I'm taking it back? It doesn't matter. What if I'll pay it back later? Doesn't matter. It's for a good cause, Robin Hood. I don't know what. It doesn't matter. What if I'm benefiting them? I don't know what. You're taking it because you're benefiting. I don't know what. No, it doesn't matter. It's not yours. It's squarely in their domain by God-given rules. So it's an emergency. Okay, if it's an emergency, if it's life-threatening, yes. Emergency, not life-threatening, goodbye, Charlie. So all these reasons are zero. The Torah says what? It's not yours, period, end of story. You can't jimmy your way out of that. You can't wiggle your way out of that. Go ahead, Mike.
Just wondering if the rabbis had any comments on taxation.
Oh, if taxation is like theft, right?
I mean, fundamental libertarian principle, taxation is theft. But using the arguments that you were just talking about, if I don't want to give the government the money,
don't send them after me and say, "Hey, my rabbi said it's theft."
I'm just wondering. It's seriously, is there an exception for what the government does?
It's a good question. There is a concept of dina de malchusa dina, which means that if you're living in a society, the rules of that society you have to abide by. You can't unless there's something immoral. Not that you're stealing. If they have a law that they got to take from you, even if you would consider it stealing, right? Which I'm not saying it is or isn't, but even if you were considering stealing, you have to abide by the rules of the land. The rules of the land.
Isn't there a biblical basis for taxation anyway?
there's certain taxations that happened back in the temple times and even when there was monarchy, but it was for specific things. It wasn't just the king could wake up one morning and decide to tax for whatever. There was parameters of where they could and can't do.
Yeah, well, that's similar to taxation, though. The parameters there may have been we're doing a census, and therefore all males between age this and that have to, give some money, or you have to tithe over, certain amounts to the Kohanim and Levain.
I think the idea that any particular individual can decide tax at any level is not in the Torah. That's what I'm saying. But there has to be some sort of parameters around that. Is that what the Torah had? Well, I'll tell you the big difference between before King Saul and after. There are many differences. He was the first king, obviously. One of the big things was obviously he established a proper military, and he started the first tax. So there were things that there were authority that the king had, but I don't know. I don't want to get into this rabbit hole because it could take a while. But it's a good debate. It's a very appropriate debate to have within this context. There's no question. Okay, let's keep on going. Text 4B, I think, will be even more surprising than text 4A. Did you just, Ken, you just read? Yeah, you
I
just read.
just
So
read.
Barry, please text 4B.
Explicit consent needed. One who enters another person's orchard or garden may not pick fruit without the owner knowing, even if the owner is a close friend who cares about him deeply and would probably be happy to hear that he enjoyed the fruit. Since the owner does not know about it at the time, taking the fruit is still considered benefiting in a forbidden way. The same principle applies in similar situations. People should be clearly informed about this because many err in this area out of lack of awareness.
It's amazing. You go to your friend's house, he has a banana on his counter. You want to eat the banana. You know that if you ask him, he would have been upset. Come on, why you wait for me? I'm gonna let you. The Torah says no. Why? You got to get permission. It's not yours. It's not about logic. It's a pretty radical idea. It's a pretty radical idea. None of that matters. Its permission was not granted, and that's a boundary and that's a line. Finished. So we're trying to close a lot of these loopholes that could exist. So if you're going to use logic, as Dale, you said, what's going to happen? You could jimmy it, you could finagle it, you could you could bend it, you could try to figure it out. But the Torah has a very hard line, which is what? It's a divine decree. It's not yours. There's only one exception, and that exception has a condition for saving a life, and you have to have the intention to repay. Okay. The next one we're going to explore is murder. Let's see. Bernice, please. The divine image.
A debate between two Talmudic sages over the greatest principle of the Torah, together with the Talmud's explanation for why humanity began with a single individual, will help us understand the true value of human life. We will also put the ideas we have been building under maximum pressure, moving from theory to the most extreme moral case imaginable. Can a moral framework truly hold when life itself is at stake? By contrasting human-centered ethics with a God-centered understanding of human value, we clarify why some moral boundaries cannot be crossed at all, even in the name of saving ourselves or others.
All right. So the greatest principle. The next JLI course we're going to do over the summer is going to evaluate. It's going to call the Sinai and Civics, which is which we're going to touch on this idea a little bit of overlap with this one, but the question is, what is the value of human life, and why is it so terrible to end a human life? So we're obviously going to explore this from a Torah perspective. And why is ending a human life such a bad thing? Now, whatever it says in moral, we're gonna in modern times we'll put aside for a second. Let's go back to the Torah, Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 27. Let's see what Hashem says. Back to Dale, please.
What page is that?
Page 60, text 5.
Yes, that's where I am. The divine image, a debate between two Talmudic sages.
Oh no, Bernice
over-
just read that. The text later, text
Oh.
5, right after. Yeah.
Oh, I thought in the image of God. God created the human in his image. In the image of God, he created the human being. Male and female, he created them. The greatest principle
One
in the
second. So let's
Torah.
pause 1 second. So we have here across most of history, a person's value, a person's worth was measured on strength, intellect, wealth. You know, when the Titanic went down, who were the only ones allowed in those lifeboats were the first class. This is the way life was for the longest time. But what the Torah tells us is that it's not the output of a person that creates their value. According to the Torah, it's the divine origin that creates a person's value, not what they contribute.
Mhm.
So, and the reason is because every single person bears within himself, within herself, the image of Hashem. They're created in the image of God. Period. In the story. So you can't say that some people's lives are deplorable. You can't rationalize genocide. You can't argue that maybe one life is better than another life. And you obviously know there's a teaching of Rabbi Akiva that loving your fellow as yourself is the basis of the Torah. Text number 6. Dale, could you read text 6 as well?
Rabbi Akiva taught that you shall love your fellow as yourself. Leviticus 19:18 is a great principle in the Torah. Ben Azai responded, this is the story of the descendants of Adam. On the day God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. This is an even greater principle.
So we have a debate. You know, you always heard the first line. You never heard the second line, right? Growing up, you always read the first line. Here you have the second line. Ben Azai disagrees. What? Even greater than this is the line what? That Zeh Sefer Torah that what? That a person, the story of the descendants of Adam. What's going on over here? Let's see the question. Dale, let's do the question on 61, please.
Question. Rabbi Akiva says the greatest principle is love your fellow as yourself. Ben Azai says an even greater principle is the verse about all humanity being created in the divine image. I'm confused here. Why do you think Ben Azai considers his principle greater? What might it add or explain that Rabbi Akiva's does not?
Let me explain quickly. We have two quotes. We have Rabbi Akiva said the great principle in the Torah is love your fellow as yourself. Ben Azai says no, 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 no. That is a greater one. What's the greater one? He made him in Hashem's likeness, in his image, similar to God. That's even a greater principle. The question is, why might you think that Ben Azai's principle, he thinks his principle is greater than Rabbi Akiva's principle? So the first answer is, it's not about what love, it's the why. Ben Azai is telling you not what, he's telling you why. And why obviously comes before what? Simon Sinek wrote a book. I think he's a Jewish, right? Is he Jewish? I think he's Jewish. He wrote a book. He says, start with why. That in every conversation, in every event you do at Chabad, and anything you do in your life, you start with why. Why are we doing this? And then you'll know the how, the what, the when. It all has to start with why. So Ben Azai says it's about the why. Why love your fellow? Because we're created in Hashem's image. That's one option. Another option might be that, according to Ben Azai, there are no calculations, which means there's no differences. You're not looking at social contracts, the benefit to maybe why I might be better, maybe this one's better. There's no calculation. It's done. I was created in God's image. You were created in God's image. It flattens the playing field completely.
I hear you.
And third is that we are all descendant from Adam, that when Hashem created human beings, Hashem created one. Everything else, Hashem created multiple. Why did Hashem create one? Because this idea that we all come from the same place. We all come, I
Mm-hmm.
can't say my lineage is better than yours, because we both come from the same lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
That's
look at
horrendous.
figure 2.3. Figure 2.3, we have on page 62 the debate between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai. According to Rabbi Akiva, love your fellow as yourself. That's the principle. The nature of the principle is a command. It tells a person what to do. But Ben Azai, he says it's created in man, God created man in his likeness. The reason behind the commandment, it tells a person what a human being is. It's a fundamentally different command. Number two, what it emphasizes, love your fellow as yourself. It emphasizes, according to Rabbi Akiva, moral action based on comparison. Treat others the way you want to be treated. I'm sorry, that's the second. I'm sorry. Yes, the way you want to be treated. But that could give room for interpretation. I want to be treated this way. I like when I meet my friend, he gives me a slap on the back. So I'm treating you the same way, whatever it is. But Ben Azai will tell you, human identity. Every person carries a divine. It's the identity. It's not about how I want to be treated. It's about the other person and his independent identity. And the third thing is the scope, which is love your fellow as yourself. According to Rabbi Akiva, potentially limits. Is potentially limited. This applies most naturally to one's fellow, someone within your group. Love your fellow as yourself. But God created man in his likeness is universal, and you can't say there are different hierarchies within society. Okay? Now we're going to see in text number 7, according to the Mishnah, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, of why a human being was created in a singular. Why only one human being at a time? I think we're holding Mike.
The value of a single life. And that's from the Mishnah. Yeah. Initially, a single human being was created to teach us that one who destroys a single life is considered to have destroyed the entire world. And one who sustains a single life is considered to have sustained the entire world. Also, this maintains harmony among humanity so that one person cannot say to another, my ancestor is greater than yours. And this tells us of God's greatness. For when a person mints many coins from the same mold, all the coins are alike. But God mints every person through the mold of the first human, and yet no two people are alike. Therefore, every person must say, the world was created for me.
Pretty self-centered statement, right? The world was created for me. I'm sure this Mishnah you guys heard before in your life, right? It's a pretty famous Mishnah.
Yeah.
But what do we have here? We have two ideas here. Number one, we have why did Hashem create humanity with a single human being? It becomes to tell us that every single person is infinitely indispensable. You save a life, you save the world. And number two is because harmony among humans. We all come from the same source. We're all branches from the same tree, and we don't have a racial divide, a societal divide, all that. We judge people based on their choices, not based on their identities or backgrounds, etc. So we see a letter from the Rebbe in October of 1991. The Rebbe sent a letter to a Polish politician named Rybicki, followed by, there was an anti-Semitic incident happened in Warsaw, Poland. So the Rebbe sent this letter in page number 64, text 8. Ken, please.
A single progenitor. I would like to add that last month, in the beginning of Tishrei, we ushered in the current Jewish New Year, 5752, with the celebration of Rosh Hashanah, the anniversary of the creation of the first man. Adam. Our sages of the Talmud explain why the creation of man differed from the creation of other living species, and why, among other things, man was created as a single individual, unlike other living creatures created in pairs. One of the reasons, our sages declare, is that it was God's design that the human race, all humans everywhere and at all times, should know that each and all descend from the one and the same single progenitor, a fully developed human being created in the image of God, so that no human being could claim superior ancestral origin. Hence, they would also find it easier to cultivate a real feeling of kinship in all interhuman relationships. Indeed, although Rosh Hashanah is a Jewish festival, our prayers for a happy new year include also all the nations and dwellers on earth, and true happiness includes everyone's peace and prosperity, both materially and spiritually.
Nice. So the Rebbe is adding a point, which is that we are unique and irreplaceable. That's why Hashem created all humanity as a single human being. So you look at figure 2.4 on page 65, we have a little bit of a summary of the idea of why, what we learned from the fact that humanity was created in the singular. And we have these three ideas. These three ideas that we just discussed. Number one, that we save a life, we save the world. Number two, we all come from the same place. And number three, that we all have a unique, independent, and irreplaceable mission from Hashem. And that's what we say, that the world is created for me. It's not arrogance. It's not beating your chest that I'm the most important thing on planet Earth. That the whole world is equally balanced and there's something you can contribute that no one else can contribute. And that's the idea. All right. So now let's take the stress test. We'll stress test this framework, this idea that everyone was created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of Hashem. So the act, and we're going to see what that means with the prohibition against murder or the act of murder. So in a secular system, murder is a crime against the individual, obviously, but it's also a crime against society, against the social contract. But the Torah says it's a different reality by definition. This is a crime and it's an offense against the creator of planet Earth and the creator of the universe. It's not an offense against the individual and their family and the social construct. This is an inherent, deep offense against Hashem. So this offense diminishes God's light in this world. Let's see what God told Noah after the flood, when God introduced the prohibition of killing. And how did Hashem frame it? Text number 9 on page 66. Barry, if you can please read it.
I will demand an accounting for your lifeblood, for God made the human in his image.
Period. End of story. Hashem is personally going to demand an accounting for the lifeblood of the blood that you spilled. This is the reason why murder is not okay. Not because it's not appropriate to the person or to the family or to society or to our social construct. God is taking a personal offense here. If someone commits murder, I am taking an offense to that. I am taking an accounting for their blood because they're created in my image. It's as if you almost killed God. It's personal. It's a different nature. So that's why in the tablets you have on one side God's stature. I am Hashem, your Lord. I am God. And the next side, which are one in essence, do not murder. These are together. It's not because, society or whatever. If I am God, then this also is true. Do not murder. It's hand in hand. It's together. Let's see this here, reinforcing the theological link. Barry, if you read text 10, please.
On the first tablet, it says, I am the Lord your God. And opposite, on the other tablet, it says, do not murder. This teaches us that anyone who spills blood, the Torah considers it as if they have diminished the stature of the Almighty.
So if you look at the five, right? The five on one side and five on the other side, the first, which is I am the Lord your God, is corresponding, is equal, is on the same line as the sixth, which is do not murder. Because why? These are interlocked. These are links that cannot be undone. Like we know there's this the famous trolley problem, right? So if you're going, there's a trolley on the tracks. We discussed this in a previous JLI course. If there's a trolley, if there's a trolley going on the tracks, and if you were to leave the trolley on its own, it's going to go down and murder five people that are tied to the track. But you have the ability to pull a lever and redirect the trolley to go take the right hand turn, and it's going to murder one person on the track. What do you say is better? What should a guy do? Let me dramatize. Okay, the guy on the right, the one guy that's tied down, is a terrible deadbeat of a human being that contributes nothing to society. How's that for a dilemma?
Perfect.
So what do we do?
We do nothing
You do nothing. Why?
because we are not allowed to actively take the life of the other person, even though it's a hard thing to just sit there and watch it happen. We still have to do it.
Aha. Anybody agree with Shmuel? Mike agrees with Shmuel. Barry agrees with Shmuel.
I agree.
Dale agrees with Shmuel. Ken agrees with Shmuel. Half
Yeah.
half. Yes. Bernice, you agree with Shmuel?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
It's a good answer. Well, Shmuel is absolutely correct. According to secular ethics, five is greater than one. Hey, it's a net gain for society. Why should you have four? We should have five people leave the world. Hey, you can have a net gain. You gain four. It's pretty good. But Torah ethics is, again, as Shmuel literally said the words, you're not allowed to actively take a life. By you moving that lever, you are actively ending someone's life, and that you're not allowed to do. And let's see a case from the Talmud, an actual case in the Talmud on page 67. Bernice, please.
A certain individual came before Rava and said to him, the governor of my town said to me, go kill so-and-so, and if you do not kill him, I will kill you. What shall I do? Rava said to him, let him kill you, and do not kill anyone. For what makes you assume that your blood is redder than that of your victim? Perhaps the blood of that man is redder than yours.
An individual's value is not quantifiable. It's not calculatable or measurable. It's independent. Each one is infinitely independently valuable. And we have no right to go and take actively somebody's life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Next, section 6. Back to Dale, b'vakasha.
The dignity of the divine. The violation of the divine image is not limited to physical harm. Once human value is understood as rooted in the divine image, the Torah's moral sensitivity extends into realms we often dismiss as minor or excusable.
Let's do text 12, please.
Text 12. A wound without a knife. A teacher taught before Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak, one who shames another in public is as though they have spilled blood. Rabbi Nachman responded, you have spoken correctly, for we see that the face of the shamed person loses its redness and becomes pale. That's funny.
Yeah. So the
True.
question is, embarrassment is like akin to spilling blood? I mean, come on. It's a little bit of an exaggerated statement, right? So the answer is, if we're looking at this as the way we're defining it, which is a divine image, So it treats a human being not as a bearer of divine image. It treats a human being as an object to ridicule. So both murder and humiliation derive from the same idea, which is a failure to respect Hashem's image. So yes, obviously it's different, but in a sense it's not different because in a sense you are denying the basic idea, which is that a human being is created in Hashem's image and it must be protected and respected, etc. Let's see text number 13. Mike, bevakasha.
Text number 13, even a shadow of shame, again from the Talmud. A tied document was brought before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He exclaimed, "This document has no date." His son, Rabbi Shimon, replied, "Perhaps the date is hidden within the tied folds." Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi opened the document and saw that the date was indeed written between the folds. He then looked at his son with disapproval, for he opposed the use of tied documents. Rabbi Shimon protested, "I did not write it. Rabbi Yehuda Chayata wrote it." Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi responded, "Turn away from this kind of malicious speech."
There you go. But you see here,
I don't understand the point.
Yeah. Neither do I.
they were shifting blame. Rabbi Yehuda first.
Is it just a factual statement? I didn't write it. I was asked to deliver it by so and so who wrote it.
Don't throw someone else under the bus.
Well, it sounds like passing the blame.
The idea here is Rabbi Yehuda did not take lightly to this to passing the blame on somebody else in public. That was the idea. In other words, it was right. It was true. He didn't write it, but he's like giving him. He looked at him with like sharp eyes, and he's like, because Rabbi Yehuda opposed to use these tied. I don't get into the technicalities, but there's certain documents that were tied a certain way, and Rabbi Yehuda was opposed to it. But when he saw that, when he thought his son did it, he gave his son a stare or whatever, and then his son shifted the blame publicly. So then he reprimanded him. Why? Because you're embarrassing the other guy in public. So we're trying to say the extent of being embarrassing somebody in public, even when it's deserved, is still
So if you,
something that is a problem. Why? Because you're jeopardizing with God's divine image in this world. You're messing with it. You're messing with God's divine. That's the point. So it's a side point, but that's the idea.
Okay.
What we're saying here in this section is not just murder. We're saying how powerful this divine image idea is, that it applied even to embarrassment, and not just big embarrassment, subtle embarrassment. Why is that a problem? Why is subtle embarrassment a problem? Because we're backtracking it to the same core belief, which is a human being is created in God's image, and human dignity equals divine image, and you cannot be messed with.
so if you're arrested for something you didn't do and you can prove it with someone else, you take the hit?
You do it privately, or I don't know. It's a good
There
question.
you're in open court. You were arrested. You're
Take the hit.
charged. And you have the alibi, and you saw someone else enter, and it's true, but you take the hit because you can't give that person up.
No, that won't apply to this. No, this is talking about him. In other words, he could have said, "Dad, I didn't write it. It was written by someone else." He could have got out of that way. Why you gotta put the guy's name out there, right? In other words, not that there was a damage, like you're saying, I was arrested. I mean, that's more of an extreme. You don't have to take abuse. That's not what we're saying here. But to say something you didn't need to say, to cause someone else embarrassment, that Rabbi Yehuda had a problem with.
Okay, that I understand.
Right?
Got it.
Yeah. Listen, as they say, halavai, we should live by this every day. But at least we know where the standard is, you know?
Okay.
I once had a boss. I once had a boss who asked me to go to a meeting in his place, but to make sure that the meeting didn't decide such and such. And so I was there. I was 1 against 5, and they all wanted to do such and such, and my job was to argue them out of it. Well, okay, I sort of argued them out of it, but my final words were, and anyway, my boss wants it this way.
Ah.
Okay, so I got back to my boss and reported to him that we got it. And I said, finally, I said, by the way, I told him it was your idea. And he let me have it with both barrels. He said I was throwing him under the bus. I said, but we got what we wanted. He says, you didn't have to bring me into this.
Right.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Where are we holding? Who just read? Ken?
I did not read that.
I
I'm
think
all
I
for
did.
Blungit here. Who just read this text 13?
I think it was me.
Yeah, it was
Okay, so
you,
Ken,
Mike.
go ahead. Section 7.
The expanding circle of sanctity. Let us widen the frame. If value truly flows from God, then it cannot stop at humanity alone. The world is no longer a neutral backdrop or a warehouse of resources, but a creation imbued with meaning, calling for responsibility rather than exploitation. A God-centered value system affirms the worth of every creature without blurring the unique and non-negotiable sanctity of each human life.
All right, so not just human beings. This same concept applies, in a sense, to everything that God created on planet Earth. And we're going to have this idea of Ever Minachai, which means eating flesh that was torn from an animal while it was still alive. Let's go, Ken. Let's do text 14.
Avoiding cruelty. Not to eat a limb from a living animal. We are commanded not to eat a limb taken from a living creature, meaning a limb that was cut from an animal while it was still alive. One of the roots of this mitzvah is so that we not train ourselves in cruelty, which is an especially repulsive trait. In truth, there is no cruelty greater than cutting off a limb or flesh from a living animal while it is alive before you and eating it. This prohibition applies in all places and at all times to both males and females. And this is one of the 7 commandments that apply to all people of the world.
This is a basic idea. The Torah does not want us to be callous, to be cruel. Barry, let's do text 15. Pretty interesting, vivid illustration from the Talmud.
Compassion for all creatures. A calf that was being led to slaughter broke away and hid its head in Rabbi Yehuda Hanasai's cloak, crying. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasai said to it, "Go, this is what you were created for." They said in heaven, since he did not show mercy, suffering should come upon him. The suffering went away as a result of the following episode. One day, the maidservant of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasai was sweeping the house. She was about to sweep away some young weasels. He said to her, "Leave them alone, for it is written, His mercy is upon all his works." They said in heaven, since he has shown mercy, we shall show mercy to him.
So Rabbi Yehuda originally lacked mercy to the calf that ran away and hid, tried to hide. And therefore he had a certain decree in heaven. But when he showed the opposite, that he had mercy for young weasels that were not for a purpose, right? The calf maybe had a purpose to feed, but the young weasels was no purpose, no utility to him. And he showed compassion, so that triggered in heaven that they should have compassion upon him. Why? Because our compassion mirrors God's universal compassion. So the story teaches us that we have to have a very that every one of God's creation has an inherent value. It doesn't mean that the Torah prohibits eating animals. You're allowed to eat the animal, but the animal must be treated in a humane way. And that's why the knife that they use to slaughter an animal, if it has one nick, the animal's not kosher. Why? Because a nick means that the flesh was not cut, it was torn. And torn means that the animal feels the pain. You know, sometimes you get a cut on your finger and it was so sharp the knife you didn't even feel it. That's the idea. The knife has to be so sharp. And if there's one little nick, the animal's not kosher because the animal felt pain before it died. Now, how do we know that the animal doesn't feel pain with the slaughter knife of a shochet? God told us that. That's all I can tell you. But this is the idea. The animal must be ended its life in a humane and in a respectful, humane way. Why? This is the same idea. We're mirroring Hashem. We're mirroring God. Okay, Bernice, let's do section 8, please.
After tracing morality from its source through human dignity and out into the wider world of creation, we return to the classic debate between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai that frames everything we have discussed.
Okay, let's say the question.
After everything we have learned in this lesson, what argument might Rabbi Akiva make that his principle is greater?
So Rabbi Akiva, what'd you say, Mike?
I just was repeating I was repeating for myself what Rabbi Akiva's position was. Love your fellow as
Love
yourself.
your fellow as yourself. The next slide we'll summarize a little bit, but let's see here. Morality anchored in divinity, that's the core belief, which means there's an absolute worth of human life as an offshoot of that. And an offshoot, again, of morality is anchored in divinity, is that all creations have an inherent value. Everything. There's a story of the Rebbe Rashab. When he was a child, he was walking in the forest with his father. And as he was walking, he went to a bush that was there and he grabbed the base of the bush and stripped the leaves. You're walking and talking and you're distracted. And his father turned to him and says, "What are you doing? You have a utility for this? You have something you need this for? You're just destroying for the sake of destroying." Right? So it's a sensitivity, right? It's a sensitivity. So according to Rabbi Akiva, love your fellow as yourself is the why, but it's the call to action based on the why, and it's the practical. So Ben Azai and Rabbi Akiva are not really arguing on the principle; they're arguing on what do we put emphasis on. According to Ben Azai, he wants to put emphasis on the why of everything. According to Rabbi Akiva, he says the why is not as important as application day to day. You wake up the next morning and the guy's going to cut you off when you're driving. What do you do? Or whatever it is, the situation. Now you're in the situation. So he's not into the theory as much or into the philosophy so much. He's more about the application. But Ben Azai and Rabbi Akiva are not really that far off in terms of what they're trying to teach us. So I think we're to draw this whole class to a close. We'll play a short video, but it's this idea of we're learning that for a society to have a successful, sustainable, moral-based society, it has to be morality based on not logic, not conscious, not society, but it has to be an asserted morality that's asserted by something outside of ourself and by God. This is a basic idea. Otherwise, it may work for an individual. And could an atheist be a moral person? The answer is yes. But to base a society on a godless idea that, we could have logic and conscience and this and that to replace it, it's a very slippery slope and very bad things happen in our history. And this is the idea that the gift that God gave us and through us gave the whole of humankind is the Torah, which gives us a God-based morality. So with that, let's look at a lesson summary, but the key points.
Lesson 2. Is morality obvious? 1. The Torah teaches that morality must come from a source beyond human reason, emotion, or agreement. Without belief in God as the authority behind ethics, moral rules become unstable and can be reinterpreted or overridden when convenient. 2. Logic, conscience, and social consensus can explain moral feelings or patterns of behavior, but they cannot establish why an action is objectively right or wrong. These approaches lack a stable standard for moral judgment. 3. A God-based moral system introduces absolute property and ownership boundaries that cannot be negotiated away by logic, emotion, need, or social benefit. The question is not, does this make sense, or will this help? But did God draw this line? True morality starts where human reasoning would otherwise excuse crossing it. 4. The prohibition against murder rests on the Torah's understanding of human value. Human worth is not granted by society or earned through ability, but given by God through the divine image, making every human life absolutely and equally valuable. 5. Murder is an offense against God himself, since it diminishes his presence in the world. For this reason, it cannot be justified by numbers, benefit, or even claims of self-preservation. And this logic also extends to public humiliation, which the Talmud equates with spilling blood. 6. The Torah extends value beyond human life to all of creation, requiring compassion toward animals while maintaining a clear moral hierarchy.
All right, the next lesson we'll have next week, we're going to be dealing with education and why that's important to apply it all. Sometimes, especially in today's world, we see great educational institutions that teach amazing things, but are sometimes missing basic morality. So yes, we're dealing with morality, but we're also going to see how education plays a role, because without proper education, morality could be completely spun out. So that's that.